In 1914, Britain sat at the center of a financial web that stretched from Cairo to Kolkata. It ruled an empire of credit, with the City of London acting as the world's undisputed clearinghouse, where international trade was settled in gold. Then the war began. The conflict that was supposed to be over by Christmas collided with the industrial reality of modern warfare, becoming the most expensive military operation in human history. Britain bankrolled the entire anti-German coalition, funneling staggering sums to partners like France and Russia, while simultaneously feeding its own insatiable war machine. This chart tracks the resulting explosion of British national debt. Between 1914 and 1917, it skyrocketed from £650 million to £7.2 billion. Domestic taxation covered a quarter of expenditure. This shaded gap shows the primary deficit, forcing the government to borrow at suicidal rates. The British treasury was burning through money faster than it could tax, borrow, or print it. Overnight, the world's richest creditor nation became a desperate borrower. The primary lender keeping the Allies afloat was across the Atlantic. By early 1917, J.P. Morgan and Company was carrying roughly $500 million in unsecured short-term British debt. This created a precarious dependency. If Britain defaulted, Morgan would collapse. If Morgan collapsed, Wall Street and the broader American economy would be dragged down with it. President Woodrow Wilson understood the leverage he held. In late 1916, he ordered the Federal Reserve to halt foreign currency loans, a direct move to choke Britain's credit and assert American economic dominance over any future alliance. The intervention brought the entire transatlantic financial structure to the edge. By summer 1917, the British Treasury came within hours of a total default. Staring into the abyss of bankruptcy, the British Empire began trading the only currency it had left: promises of foreign land. To survive, British diplomats adopted a strategy of credible obfuscation. They began issuing vague, overlapping promises to different groups to secure immediate military and political support. The first deal occurred in the McMahon-Hussein correspondence. Britain promised to support Arab independence in exchange for a revolt against the Ottoman Empire, a campaign that thousands of Arab fighters joined believing they were winning self-determination. But Britain had already struck a second deal in secret. The Sykes-Picot agreement with France explicitly contradicted the promise of Arab independence, carving that same territory into European spheres of influence using a map and a straight edge. By late 1917, even these alliances weren't enough to break the stalemate. Britain was physically running out of ammunition and financially running out of time. Faced with a vacuum of capital and critical resources, Britain prepared to offer that same strip of Ottoman desert for a third time. Strategically, the British Empire needed a friendly population near the Suez Canal. Control of this waterway was essential for trade with India and the movements of the Royal Navy. Simultaneously, a munitions crisis threatened the war effort until biochemist Chaim Weizmann invented a novel acetone fermentation process. His discoveries saved Britain's cordite supply and gave Weizmann, the leading Zionist advocate, direct access to the highest levels of government. The British cabinet saw a way to solve several problems at once. By supporting a Jewish homeland, they hoped to rally Jewish opinion in America and keep Russian Jewish soldiers motivated to stay in the war. On November 2, 1917, Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour issued a 67-word letter expressing support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. The letter was addressed to Lord Rothschild. Cabinet records confirm the British government hoped this signal would translate into financial assistance from the Rothschild banking dynasty and its global networks. The Balfour Declaration was a calculated, multi-layered transaction. A desperate empire traded land it did not control for the bank loans and bombs it needed to survive. Britain emerged from the war as a debtor. Its global financial supremacy was lost to New York, leaving the empire crippled and overextended. Under the 1920 Palestine Mandate, a broke Britain was tasked with an impossible contradiction: facilitating a Jewish national home while safeguarding the rights of the existing Arab population, who had lived on that land for centuries. As the demographic balance shifted, tensions reached a breaking point. The 1930s saw the Great Arab Revolt, one of the largest anti-colonial uprisings in the empire's history, requiring tens of thousands of British troops to suppress it. By the 1940s, the situation had become an ungovernable nightmare. Jewish paramilitary organizations were now attacking the very British infrastructure that had enabled their presence in the region. The survival strategy Britain used in 1917 had evolved into a violent, ruinously expensive colonial trap. Following the Second World War, Britain's financial state reached an all-time high of 249% of its GDP. This chart shows a debt so massive it effectively ended the era of British supremacy. Out of money and out of options, Britain admitted failure in 1947. They handed the Palestine problem to the United Nations and withdrew entirely the following year. While the map has been redrawn by decades of subsequent wars, the core tensions remain rooted in the incompatible framework built in 1917. The modern Middle East is the compounding interest of a bankrupt empire, a region still defined by the futures that desperate men traded away for a war they could no longer afford to fight.